Okay, people joining our live stream, we are looking at updates to the dataset function. Can we get the background noise here muted? Okay, so we're going to start off talking about computational stuff, and then we're going to go to talking about rendering stuff. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. So one of the first things we have discussed a few times is how to provide the headers independently of the data. Like you have an array of data, and you want to specify the headers independently.
Yes. Well, I think the issue with dataset, let's remind everybody that the long-term vision of dataset is that it can be backed by things other than in-memory data. So, for example, dataset, you should be able to take a relational database and say dataset of that. Am I making sense?
Yep.
And that has the header information. So, what would you imagine here? I mean, this is more like this. I mean, there's headers on the first level, the second level, etc. Right?
Exactly. Yes. So the idea here is that sometimes we have, say, an array of data, which is a packed array of data, and then we want to treat it together with its headers.
I personally think that should be another function, like array dataset, because I think dataset itself, I'm not certain, but I think dataset itself is going to end up being needed. I mean, this then will be an array here. That will be the first level. I mean, this is our association. I mean, this is exactly our thing for turning an array into an association, isn't it?
Yes, but the problem is that if we include the headers as an association, the inner levels are going to repeat the keys multiple times.
Well, okay, that's not what I. Oh.
And that's problematic in terms of blowing up memory, etc.
Well, it shouldn't be. I mean, that we should be handling that issue separately. I see. You're saying this is a way to put in headers independent of what the internal representation is. But if we say normal of that data set, we better get the nested association thing.
Yes, yeah. At that moment, we can go back to a standard representation. But I think if we manage not to have to change the data, that would be better. So we should be able to treat a data set as a black box, which has different types of internal representation.
We need to check with Todd and the folks who are doing out of memory stuff, okay? Because I don't think dataset of relational database doesn't work yet, but it probably will.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, this is effectively the same idea. It's just from the point of view of the internal representation rather than from the point of view of how you express.
Yeah, well, fine. I don't disagree with that.
Yes. So another thing that we would like to change here is the fact that dataset is using internally several caching methods. So we would like to unify that.
Yeah, that's completely crazy. I mean, the other thing is that this business about datasets not storing themselves in notebooks is crazy.
So Chris will talk about that. So Chris has a solution.
Yeah, I've already implemented that.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay.
Yes. So we also need extensions for the query language. So more operators, in particular the column-oriented operations that we have discussed several times.
Yeah, I think that's a general discussion about column stuff, which we need to have separately.
Exactly, yes. But it's going to be especially important for data sets.
What is meant by column-oriented operations? Or is it not possible
like column map, something like that, or whatever the right way to do that is?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, acting on columns of elements, not rows.
Okay, dataset on the functions. So what do you mean by on?
Well, I was expecting that we would be able to both, I mean, here it's dataset acting on a time series and doing something with it so that we can use it as a dataset. So I think because TimeSeries is another important data container, I think we need a way of making them interact.
Yeah, but by the way, can we make sure that the next ILD meeting we talk about that, what do we call it? Not time series, but
Oh, the data series of yesterday?
yes, dated series.
Mm-hmm.
It should be rather straightforward, but I think we need to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes, so we need to make dataset act on more data containers and also more functions act on dataset objects, which is the next.
Yes, but I don't quite understand how time series would flow into dataset. Do we understand that yet? So in other words, given a time series, well, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, so I don't have a proposal yet. So I understand that somehow time series is a continuous object, but I mean, sometimes we will have like, I don't know, granular.
No, the data for a time series could very well be a data set, could be turned into a data set.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And a data set, certain columns of a data set could turn into a time series.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Perhaps we need here some granularity argument.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
So yeah, so here we have discussed more functions that should work with dataset, and you have sent suggestions like this one.
Right. Yes. Yeah, Sander on the live stream is asking about terabyte-sized data sets. The answer is yes, using, I mean, we have basically three strategies. We have the relational database stuff, which I think we should be able to just implement that. I mean, I think that's a pretty straightforward hookup, which I think you need to talk to Todd and the database people about, guys, where we just say database of a relational database, and it should just, you should be able to do dataset operations on that. And not all of them will work. It'll say, some of them, it'll say, warning, has to be read into memory to make this work.
Right.
Make sense?
Yes. And I'm sure we will learn some new operations to extend the query language from the things they do, so new types of.
Right. But I mean, I don't even know, and it's a good question, and Sushma, this is one for you to follow up on. Given a relational database object, how do you just read it in as a data set? I don't know how you do that. I don't know whether import works on it or what the heck works on it.
Well, so I think import is able to read like access files.
Oh, sure. But I mean, the point is, once you've already got it hooked up, you've already got things chosen and all that kind of stuff, there's something which should just bring it in as a data set. And I think probably that the data set function itself should leave it on disk, right? Or leave it in database land and do operations on it insofar as it can. But there needs to be a way of just getting the thing raw as a data set so that and maybe there's an option to say whether it's going to be local or not, right? Okay, so then the other thing is the file-based dataset business. Okay, so that is Leonid's chunk creature, and that needs to be explored. So the belief is, okay, so just, I mean, I want to add a comment here. Well, here we go, lazy out of course computation. So one thing there is relational database. Another thing there is file backed with CSV, HDF, etc. Right? And the final one is Spark backed, which is a distributed database. which we keep on starting to work on and then stopping working on.
Okay. So is anybody working on that right now?
Which?
Spark Bucket?
No, Dylan B was working on it at one point, but
Okay.
that project has been hibernated, right, Sushma?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, so this one should be rather easy now. Okay.
Okay.
And in particular, people are going to bleat that the operations in dataset don't map perfectly into the operations that you can do on a database. Well, tough luck, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this one here, as I say, Leonid got a long way with this, but we didn't finish it. Sandra on the live stream is supporting the file backed one. Well, I'd like to know what file format you'd like. Because CSV, it's very unobvious what, seeking around in a CSV file is complicated. And I'm not sure how we imagine we're going to do that. But, that's what that's where Leonid's thing. Leonid is building, a snake processor, as in, it's like, it's a thing where it's like the snake eating an antelope or something. I keep on using this analogy. It's a really stupid analogy. But you understand what I mean. It's operating on one part of this long file at a time. It's chunk based.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay. I think again, you guys should find out what the status of that is, because Leonid built a lot of stuff, and then we killed that project because he couldn't understand the use case. Yeah, Sandra is saying HTF5. Well, I agree, but I'd like to know, where did the HTF5 files come from? And that's really the issue for us. And I think a good exercise there would be, are there data repository, potential data repository files data sources that come in HTF5? That would be interesting to know. Are there things that we want to put in where we could do it because it's a terabyte or something, but it's in HTF5? Does that make sense? That would be a good use case for us to understand this. And if we're lucky, what Leonid did like a year ago will actually be immediately usable here. Make sense?
Yeah, I'll check with him. So another thing I want to do is effectively to reorganize this page.
Yeah, it's Wild West mostly.
Yeah. Yeah. So it has examples, but they are grouped in a non-standard way.
Yeah, well, let's not do that. I mean, and then workflow documentation for dataset. I agree, and probably a monograph of some kind.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
And then, yes, so it has also been suggested that we change a bit how the error handling works. I'm not sure about that yet. It has this option, failure action. And again, it's a bit non-standard. So
I don't know what it's really doing.
Yeah,
Can't comment.
me neither, to be honest. I have to study more the code of the dataset.
Okay. All right.
There were easier things to do, and these are kind of bigger projects.
Well, look, the big project is linguistic interpretation for datasets, linguistic querying of datasets. And that's a project that I think should get started, but that's in the machine learning group and the NLP group.
Right.
Okay, and I really think they should try and do that. I've forgotten what Apache Arrow is.
It's some sort of common format based on columns, which is being used by some other data systems, and it's apparently working quite well. So
Okay.
it would be a way of interacting with other formats and systems.
Yeah, well, that would be good. Is it an import-export format, or is it something different?
I don't think it's more like a format. It's some sort of set of functionality to help you transforming between formats.
Okay, well, we need to understand that a bit better.
Yep.
So the semantic interpreter that can return a data set with proper types. I mean, semantic interpreter is not, that to me, like, is a lower priority thing, because I think that, that's really taking our curation tools and being able to flow them into data set. And that's a complicated project.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that that's not really best done as a single one-shot function, because I think there's so much messiness in reading in data. And again, I don't think it's for this, for you guys to do this.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right. Should we move over to this?
Yeah. So you should set that path and right.
Why did it just run your initial? Oh, I see. It was in a comment anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So part of the purpose here is to set priorities, and part is to go over some issues along the way. I hope we can do both.
Why is this a bitmap here?
Because this is implemented in a branch that you don't have. You just wiped out the output. Okay. Dang. There it is. Right. That's just to show you what the output looks like. So the story
is this at the top rather
well,
than
that's one of the issues we should discuss. I just took the button that we have for the summary box stuff and pasted it on the top here.
I think it should be on the bottom.
Well, if it's a long data set, you might not see it. But I've asked design to come up with some.
Billy is here right now, right?
Yes, and I was hoping we could look at some of the use cases of Dataset or some of the examples.
By the way, it's not going to be that long because it's a paged object. If it's not paged, you did something different, and don't worry about it. See what I'm saying, Chris?
So you think we should just hang it under the bottom like we do?
I think we should hang it under the bottom like we do for all the other types of objects.
So there's nothing for design to do then here?
I think not in this case.
Okay.
I mean, unless you have a brilliant idea. I just don't think it's I don't think it's necessary. I mean, it's paged, for goodness sake.
Right.
There'll be plenty of other things for you to do. Do not worry.
Okay.
But did you have a version of this, perhaps, that we could look at? Billy?
It's in a branch. Oh, you did Billy have mock-ups, you mean?
Yeah.
No, I haven't even gotten a chance to get to it.
Okay, fine. All right.
So, if there are multiple columns in this data set, should the data not in notebook be of the same length, same width, I mean? Or should it?
You mean if the data set is a thin?
That's a design issue. I mean, if this thing is very square.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the features, okay, let me tell you a couple of design issues. Well, you're probably about to talk about that, items displayed and scrolling. Look, okay, my basic point is this should be at the bottom. The details of how it spans is another question, right? So Billy has to pay attention to that.
Okay.
Okay. So there are a couple of other issues. For the limit that determines when it stores the data in notebook and when not, I'm using the summary box data size limit. Is that okay, or do you think we need a different symbol for that? It's the same thing.
I think it's okay. I think it's okay. I think that, what's that?
Well, the symbol is not named ideally to use it for data set, but.
No, it isn't. Is that a documented symbol?
I don't know if it's documented.
It is.
It is.
God, I wish we had. Is that on our priority list, Sushma, the auto completion of this thing?
I can check, but I don't recall it being there.
Well, we could argue that this is a summary box. I don't think it's hopelessly different from a summary box.
No, it's very much the same kind of thing.
Okay. I think you can use that for now.
Okay. And then I've currently only implemented this the store in notebook button if you're at the top level, if you're drilled down.
Yes, I think that's right.
Okay, good.
Okay, items displayed and scrolling.
Right, so there's currently two different options, rows displayed and columns displayed. If we want to generalize that to be able to specify the number of items at any level, then I think that the option needs to become items displayed.
I think that's right. I think you're
okay.
right.
And this is the syntax I'm proposing. If you say items display R, it's the number of top level rows. And if you give RC, it's rows and columns top level. And then you can specify RC and then paths to inner levels.
What does that mean, the path to the inner level?
Well, so that means that things in the moons column, in that case, there would be 2 items displayed. So you don't know a priori if it's going to be rows or columns, right? So.
Sorry, I don't understand. The rows, the thing is a tensor. Okay, this is the top level index of the tensor, which is usually displayed as rows. The second level index of the tensor usually displayed as columns, and this here is a deeper aspect.
Right.
But I don't understand the moons part of that. So
if this is referring to the planets data set.
All right, let's look at that.
So there's a.
Where is that? Can I
example data? Open curly first. Yeah, data set, comma, planets.
What is going on my machine? Anyway, okay.
Okay. So if you hover over the moons column header, you'll see that index, all moons.
Yes.
So if you specify that index, that says display 2 items.
What the hell is that?
That is a placeholder. Just so if you right click on that.
But look at the font there.
No, it's you just ignore it. It's a temporary placeholder. So
I see, because you've rewritten your code has overwritten what I normally do.
Yes.
Okay, fine.
Right.
Okay.
So this means for the moon's index, I only want to see 2 items.
I don't understand why this is. Okay, for the rows, the columns, you're counting numerically. The rows, boom, 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 down.
So you could get away with just always specifying an index, right? But I thought it was, most uses are going to be for the top level, so it seems to be useful to have a little syntactic.
No, I agree. But my question is, I don't understand. This is about a deeper level, because the rows and columns, does this work, by the way? Can I use the items displayed thing?
You can use rows displayed and columns displayed.
Okay.
So you have to do it by rapid. You have to do data set.
I'm sorry.
Data set of normal of that example data.
I get it. Should I not worry about the red?
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Okay, that did exactly what I would expect. Okay. Now, if I say, okay, so now what are you doing with moons here?
You can't currently, the lower level things are not implemented yet. You can only do top level with rows displayed and columns displayed right now.
Okay, but if I said columns displayed 2, then moons is just blown away.
Right.
Okay.
Well, you get a scroll bar. You can scroll to it.
Okay, fine. Okay, fair enough.
I mean, you can do that there and see how it works.
Okay.
So for this, would that store button appear below those scroll bars or to the right? Because it looked smaller. It looked like it changed for a moment.
Look like what changed?
Maybe it was just the Zoom, the meeting refreshing.
Yeah, I don't think so. Seth on our live stream asked something which I was also going to ask, which is, what if you actually just want to display only certain columns?
Right. I address that under the next topic, elisions.
Okay. All right. So I still don't quite understand this. All comma moons goes to 2. What does that do?
So that means you would only see 2 moons. So each planet has a number of moons. You would only see 2 moons.
I see. So it's this level. So this is representing the next level. But why? What's the all doing?
That's what you see if you hover over the moon's header. That's the index of that column, of that level of the data set.
So this is column 3. I'm so confused.
So
yeah, go ahead.
That's
what if I want 2 moons, but what if another piece? What if column 2 was also something that was, artificial satellites or something?
Right. Then you would specify curly all comma satellites arrow 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever.
Wait a minute, they're just free form in this? I don't understand. Isn't this positional? Rows, columns, and then this is the third level.
After rows and columns. Okay, I see your confusion. After rows and columns, it's not positional. It's just you give the path to the level in the data set and the number of items.
Bluff.
That's what I was saying about the syntactic sugar.
Bluff.
Otherwise, you're going to have to specify a path for the row and a path for the column.
No, but what you're saying is this is a path, and that's saying how many of those keys. It isn't just this. It's not just this. This moons thing, I see, that goes to an association. All comma moons. If I were to look here at this example data, and I were to say all comma moons, okay, right. I will get this. Okay, now, where's the 2? Why is there a 2 here?
The 2 means display 2 moons for each planet.
Yeah, but why? I mean, if I look at what this is, let's say, let's say I just do take that comma 4. What the hell did that do?
You did table.
Oh, I meant table, take. Where's Mars's moons? I don't understand. Why didn't that do it by row? Why didn't that take the first 4 rows? And what happened to Mars's moons?
I don't know. That may be a bug in my prototype. I wouldn't ascribe it to, but I'll check it out in the.
Okay, but fine. But if I did that, I'm utterly confused at what this is doing.
Well, let's turn it around. If you only want to see 2 moons for each planet, how would you specify that?
Sorry, I think the moons are still there. You have to click in the 1 total and 2 total. And
yeah, but I don't know why it formatted it differently in that case.
Yeah, it formatted them without displaying it. And it also didn't show.
Yeah, that may be my bug in the prototype.
All right, okay, fine. Okay, the issue is what you're trying to do here is to select in this stack of lists and associations, you are trying to take certain subsets there, or for the beginning, you're just trying to do a take. Show me, like for example, I might want to see the last 10 columns. I might want to see a span of columns. I might want to see particular columns.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I might want, items displayed. I might want 5 through 8.
Right.
Or I might want items displayed and then a sublist here, something like 1 to 4, 7, 10, for instance.
4, 7. Oh, okay, yeah.
Just a minute. Okay, so that's that. That is traditionally specified. I'm so confused here. I mean, you're saying I go down a tentacle of the data set. I see. I see. So given a path on the data set, you're asking, when you get to the end of that path, you would normally have lots of stuff to show.
Right.
But in fact, only show a part of it. So,
yes.
In particular, the full form of this would be the path that you're showing here is, the full form of this is all arrow that. The full form of this next one is, well, I don't really know what it is. Is it all, comma, all? Goes to whatever. What is the full form of the next one? And if you can tell me that, then I'm going to be more interested.
The I don't know offhand.
Okay, but that's what we have to figure out, because I'm not going to go for this. I mean, what this is saying is, with that path, the next thing you get to, show only 2 of them, right?
Yeah.
Now, I could also be saying here that what I want is, instead of just showing 2 of them, it's essentially a take spec of some kind. I could be showing, say, Deimos, Ganymede, whatever, couldn't I?
I hadn't anticipated doing that, but I suppose, well, I mean, that's only going to apply to
association.
Mars. You're picking out moons that could be in any planet.
I see. Well, so that's not necessarily right, but okay, so that's not correct.
I think the problem here is that we are using simultaneously part specs, extract specs, and take specs.
Yeah, well, right. I mean, but the basic form should be extract spec, arrow take spec, or some version of take spec. That's what it should look like. And there is an elision, perhaps, that allows you to give the levels without specifying explicit extract specs.
So I think the answer to your question earlier was, so for rows, the left-hand side is I don't know, empty, and for columns, the spec is all. So it would be empty list for rows, and then just a list of column, or a list of all for columns.
Why is there a list of all? Why isn't it just all?
Well, so for moons, it's all comma moons, right? And one level up, it's just going to be
I don't think
all.
this is right. I think it's all here, because I think that this is.
No, I think what Chris meant was the first all is an empty list.
Yeah, the first all in your statement there is an empty list. The next one is a list that contains just all.
Yeah, and potentially it could be 3, and that means focus only on the third row or column.
I don't completely understand this, but you get where I'm going with this. I think that I think this basic idea is reasonable, but I think we have to figure out how to do it. Let me go on to the elision thing, because I think that's going to be
okay. So elisions are mostly implemented in the prototype. If you right-click on a column header, there's a control to hide or show, which works with
That's
this
super
elisions
cool.
option.
That's super cool.
So you can say hide there, and it will give you ellipses. Right, you should be able to mouse down on that and say show.
But it's for some reason.
Oh, it drilled down. That's interesting.
I think it's a bug.
You must have single-clicked. Yeah. So one question is, should there be a top-level option which corresponds to this interactive behavior? I've called it elisions for now.
Yes.
Another question.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. Okay.
Now, the question is, should one be able to? I think there's an argument that you should not be able to just remove columns from the display.
Completely, you mean?
Yeah. In other words, that everything that you get here is something where you're still left with a paddle with which to oar, so to speak.
Yeah. Okay. That was my next question.
I think so. I mean, I think so. I'm not certain, but I think, having the scroll bars, having the plus signs, I kind of think that's the right approach to say this thing really is all the data. You're not actually, you might be hiding some of it, but you're not removing some of it.
Right. If you want to project the data, you would do that at the data set.
Exactly. Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Part of the data set, yeah.
Yeah, right. But I absolutely think this should be available at the top level. Now, I think that there's an argument that, and I don't know, between items displayed and items elided, I mean, we can't call it elisions. If it's going to be items displayed, we should say items elided or something like that, or items not elided, as the case may be. I'm not sure. We need to get to that in a minute. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, let's look at this. Okay, but what do you mean by elides? You just mean does things like this, right? Because it can, no orless thing. Mohammed on the live stream is saying that $elision threshold does not work. Do you know anything about that?
I don't know what that is. Is that a data set thing?
It says dataset backtick $elision threshold. Sounds relevant.
It sure does, but I'm not familiar with it.
Great. Okay. Well, sounds like that's the thing to look at. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about table view. Are you going to talk about that somewhere here?
I don't have it on the list, but we can talk about it. So my understanding from John is that table view is a low-level control object, right? So its relationship to dataset is it may be a way of implementing dataset so that scrolling is faster, because it's a low-level simple object. It doesn't do all the formatting stuff that grid does.
Okay, but there's another point about it, which is editable.
Right.
And dataset is not.
Yes.
And I don't think should be.
Yeah, I would think I would agree with that. Currently, the only question for me is whether we can implement dataset using table view, and whether there's a real advantage to doing that. And John is going to update the documentation for table view so that I know what's there, and then let me know I can do some tests on that. But I think that's the only question currently that I'm considering concerning the relationship between the two.
Well, I think that table view, it could be that some of the modern conveniences of dataset will be the fact that it's used as a nice display format. I don't know. We need to understand more about table view meets dataset. Yeah, Ethan on our live stream says editing datasets with table view will be super cool. Yeah, but it's going to be really complicated because of all these drill downs and non-rectangularities and things like this.
Right. I mean, the whole point of table view is to be simple so that it can be efficient.
Yeah, but that's, right. I mean, it's complicated. Okay, so Seth is pointing out that it will be nice to be able to do string matching on which rows you want to elide. Like elide every row that is, incidentally, if I elide multiple rows, oh, I see, that's not great. We really should have, I think, a merging elider, if you understand what I mean.
But then if you get a bunch of stuff merged, the only way you have to open them all at once, right? You can't open them back individually.
Right, but the question is, okay, so that's one thing, merged elisions. And the second thing is controlling elisions by name of column or by content.
So I actually had an implementation that did that. And I jettisoned that because you can, if you're allowed these fancy specifications, you can specify non-rectangular areas within a data set. And that complicates things immensely. So it's very expensive to implement that. That's why I'm restricting this to a very simple syntax.
Well, wait a minute. If you're killing a column or killing a row, yeah?
Yeah.
Go ahead. What's your use case? What's your case?
Well, if you say things that match one, in this case, you've got a row and a column, and that gives you an elided area. So it may not be so bad in elisions.
I don't think it's that's not the right thing. I think you need to say, given the keys of a particular set of keys at a particular level, do they match such and such? Right? And that's well defined. It's purely rectangular slicings.
Okay, that would be fine.
Okay, and I think it's also true that given the payload of one of these, like let's say most of them are missings, you might want to elide that column. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that there's an argument that says, I could imagine, I don't know if this is right, but something like name function, content function. I don't know if this is right, but something like this. Or key name, key function. Name function, whatever it is. Okay.
So the right-hand side would be an association with this.
That's what I'm suggesting, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, let's keep going, but I want to come back to this. And I also am concerned about merging of elisions, because I could imagine a thing where you've just got rid of a huge amount of stuff.
Right. I think that's fine. The only downside is you have to open them back up all at once.
Right. But so I think there's the notion of left mergeable and right mergeable.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean,
but could it be enough just to make them very thin, so that
it would be? It would be, yes, it would be. I mean, if there are multiple ones next to each other, I mean, I don't know whether that's feasible to make these very, very thin.
Yeah, well, I can make it just the width of the plus, essentially. Of course, there's no space then for an ellipsis, but.
Yeah, but you could do that if there are many next to each other. Right? I think, Billy, from a design point of view, I do not like the asymmetry here anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, I would prefer to see no white space here, just a pure plus, centered plus, and then ellipses down there.
What? Can you click the ellipses?
You should be able to.
To drill down.
Yeah, I would think so. Why wouldn't you be able to click the ellipsis?
Well, I mean, if you just click the 3 to the left, doesn't do anything.
Because it's a leaf. If it wasn't a leaf, it would drill. Right? Over here.
Yeah, but if that's elided, what are you clicking?
Oh, wait a minute. It's only a key that no. It doesn't drill unless it's a key.
Right.
So do we always need to show the ellipses if you can't drill down into them?
If it's going to be a really thin
kind of
column, it could just be blank, right? Could just be.
Yeah, I don't see why it shouldn't be blank.
And then maybe could you then hover over the whole column and some effect would happen? They click and you can expand it.
I would have thought so.
Yeah, you can just click the plus and it'll show it.
But I think that hovering should work elsewhere too. Whoops.
Right, you have to right click to get the menu.
Okay. Well, if somebody hoped I would understand the random piece of Python code in the live stream, I'm sorry, I do not. So if somebody else does, all good, but I do not. If you write it in Wolfram language or pseudo Wolfram language, I might understand it. Can't make derived columns and datasets in parallel threads. Not yet. No, that's a different story. I mean, that is using. Well, it would be interesting to understand what that really involves, and whether, in fact, what that really is something where effectively you are looking in our story of relational database file back, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think there's another case which is kind of, virtual data sets with computed columns, which we don't have. I mean, Entity Store has the notion of computed values, but Dataset does not. Does that make sense? Where the column isn't really there.
Right.
It's computed on demand, and it could be computed on a parallel kernel or whatever else. I do agree that computed datasets is interesting. Virtual computed datasets is interesting. As I say, entity stores do have that notion. I mean, not for today, but I mean, the way that would work is a data set, when you do an operation, it would look to see whether you need to, compute more values or fetch more values or whatever to get into that. Okay, so look, I think my conclusion from this is let's try the idea of just having a thin column without ellipses for the hidden thing. Okay?
Yep.
Okay, and when something is elided, I mean, this one total, well, I don't,
Yeah, that's currently a different kind of elision.
Yeah, I mean, that's more an elision that would be like a, why isn't this top level rows, why isn't that elided the same way these are? Get what I'm saying?
Well, if you're, I mean, that's handled with scroll bars, right?
Yeah, but this doesn't have a scroll bar. I mean, this could have a scroll bar as well. There could be an internal scroll bar here.
In theory, it could be an internal scroll bar instead of that control. The problem is, in order to implement that, we have to have nested grids, and they don't nest nicely. And
I see. I mean, because it looks really weird to have.
well, you can't make things butt up against each other. You get extra pixels here and there. But it can't be implemented in a single grid, because if the scroll bar is within the grid, which is being reconstructed by the scroll bar, you lose tracking.
I see what you're saying. Okay, but I mean, in principle, this mechanism could be used at the outer level.
It could.
Thing.
Right.
And arguably, that should be an option.
Yeah, that's one of the items on further down in that notebook, is being able to specify how things are elided.
Okay.
This is just an item that I don't have any tests from Tally. Tally could not provide me with any, so I need to spend some time putting together tests, especially since.
Does he have any?
No, he doesn't.
What the hell happened here?
Yeah,
so, but what about what's his name? The guy who took over this guy in the Boston office.
The one who worked with Jose?
Well, I don't remember. I mean, he didn't stay long, but who was that?
Me, Xavier? No.
No, I thought there was a person who was working with Tally, who was working on Dataset with Tally. Maybe a year. Who?
Vishak? I think Vishak and Tally were the
ones.
ones.
Oh, yeah, Vishak. Yes, that's the person. Yes, that's the person. Right. So, and what does QA have in terms of tests? Chris?
Well, I haven't asked QA.
Well, you better ask him. But Vishak would be the other person. Look at his commits and ask QA.
Yeah.
Obviously, we need tests, but we need tests for you and for QA. I'm assuming QA has a bunch of tests, so there may be some confusion here.
Right. So I've implemented one kind of header control, but there are other possibilities. You should just open up that entire section. Right. So one possibility is to put this explicit button. If you click date, it would drill down. If you click the button, it drops down the menu. Another possibility
I'm confused. If you click the date button,
what is
this?
This is just a mock-up of.
No, I know some, but where would this button go?
In a header. So to the right there, for example, next to mass.
So the question is,
it's currently implemented with a right click, but
I get it.
Instead implemented with an explicit button. What you actually asked for initially was a hover menu, which is that third option. The problem is we don't currently have the technology to do that, because our hover menus have to be dismissed with an explicit click. If you hover over that date and then go away, the menu won't go away until you click, which is bad. I think if the menu would dismiss when you leave the menu, then that would be a nice alternative.
I think that's right. So why don't you talk to John about that?
Yeah.
Look, in this case, the sort up, sort down, and so on needs to be indicated there, I think.
It is actually if you go in that menu, you can choose sorting, and it shows an almost identical icon, which would be confusing.
Okay, our note says he sent you a link to the QA dataset tests.
Okay.
So my preference here, I kind of like this idea of hover menus.
So if we have hover menus, then to drill down, that would have to be a menu item. You couldn't actually click on the header item.
Yeah, Sandra is pointing out on touch screens what happens.
You'd have to press and hold, I guess, or something.
Billy, any thoughts about that for the touch screen case?
I think it would have to be a tap to activate.
So tap would activate the menu and then another tap to dismiss the menu.
Yeah, and I don't know if it would have to show in
What
OS
about-
standard menu or if it would be a notebook thing.
What about drill down?
Well, you just go to the drill down menu.
Okay, you put it.
I mean, you tap,
Yeah.
you get the menu, you decide what to do.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, we could have a double click for, I think it would be nice if we were able to enable double click to drill down and hover to bring up a menu, if that's possible. We should investigate that. I think it would be preferable to having a lot of weird, and I think what should happen is that if it's a non-standard sorting, it should display an icon that indicates the non-standard sort, rather than displaying by default that anything happened. I mean, in other words, if you explicitly said to sort, then don't sort shouldn't display anything. But if you sort ascending or descending, then it should.
Yeah, go over to the example data on the right and evaluate that again, or click back up to the top level. Yeah. Now, so just right click on radius, and there's sort options there, so you can.
That's cool. Okay, and then it displays this.
Yeah.
Although now pressing that button, once you've displayed that thing, pressing that should take action.
Yes, it should. You have to currently press on the text.
That's very cool. That's very nice. Okay, so I think we have a good story there. Okay, let's keep going. So again, I want to come back up. We don't have a good solution for addressing which items should be displayed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to come back to that, and which should be elided initially in the initial display. I mean, another thing we don't have, which would be nice, is a way of extending the range here rather than just scrolling through it. It's like, I just want to see a bigger page. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I might suggest that we have a mechanism, a thing outside of the scroll bar, that's some kind of opener that is the analog of this opener here, right? That would just give me, some UX thing that just says, show me more, show me more, show me more. Similar to the mechanism for the output size limiter.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd really like that. Show me more, show me less.
Right.
Billy, any ideas for an icon? Double arrow or?
Is that for the scroll bars or is that for the in the table?
No. What I want to do is I want to go, I want to press a plus type thing there, and I want it to go out to Jupiter. Then I want to press plus again. I want it to go further out. And I think we could even imagine an option which controls how that going out works. I mean, it's not obvious to me that going out should be either linear or exponential.
Could there be some sort of jump button integrate? I mean, I'm not very familiar with the Dataset interface. I'll have to get a little bit more familiar with it. But
that's not a bad idea. The thing you just drew is not a bad idea.
So something over here or so like jump plus sign.
Well, we don't think we want to use a plus because we're using that. Well, yeah, we might be able to use a plus. Yeah, I mean, tab it down type thing. See that showing 1 of 3 of 8. What you've got there is actually totally confusing, because what you've got is at the bottom you have something which is paging forward, but at the left you have a scroll bar that is also paging forward.
Yeah.
Maybe they just need to rotate.
I think that line could just disappear.
Sorry, which line?
That showing, that whole bar, and those controls. So the two innermost arrow controls are replicated in the scroll bar. We could just add the go to first and go to last also to the scroll bar, or they're not even really necessary, because if you just click at the top of the scroll bar, it goes to the first position anyway.
But knowing that there are 8 objects is useful. But that's the similar to the 27 total.
It could, yeah.
It's a comment on the live stream about Jupyter Labs UI for Python datasets. It's useful to have collapse expand all. What does it do? Tell us what it does. We'd like to know. Okay. So the question here, well, okay, I think we've got something to do on this. Let me keep going just to understand what the rest of the scope is. But there's something to figure out here. We got to be able to have an interactive way to expand what we're seeing, and that should work, in my opinion, horizontally and vertically. Okay, and the fact that this is, and so maybe you're right. Maybe we get rid of this control here. The thing we're losing, but we could have it on a hover here, is the knowledge of the total number going down.
Yeah.
Right? Well, look, what we could do is this. See this 61 total? We could just have that here.
Yeah.
61 total. And it has an arrow, or it has something a little bit more elaborate than the arrow, and we could use something more elaborate than the arrow here, because that's a drill down in this case, right? At the top level, it isn't a drill down.
Could it be at the top of the header?
What?
Up above Mercury, where it says 61 total? Or whatever total.
I think we want to maybe keep the similarity or because they're all at the bottom here.
Yeah.
Yeah, good point.
I mean, this paging behavior is quite nice, but
it's confusing because it conflicts with the horizontal scroll bar.
Sure.
And it's really just replicated by the vertical scroll bar. There's no additional functionality.
Except that the vertical scroll bar is kind of, well, okay, fair enough. No, there is additional functionality. We'd have to put in the scroll bar, we'd have to put the go to end. Well, I guess not.
Right.
You just.
Well, yeah, you just click on the.
All right. Well, anyway, so maybe we get rid of that. Okay.
Yeah. So I'll get rid of it. And I'll just replace it now with a non-functional total. I mean, clicking it doesn't do anything. It just displays the total.
Yeah, I think it should only do that if The problem is this is confusing with respect to this. If it wasn't for that, that's a nice feature.
So aren't these numbers related to the scroll bar themselves? Perhaps they could appear while you are interacting with the scroll bars?
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. All right, Ethan on the live stream says, for datasets that are huge, this collapse expandable toggles between a collapsed version that gives a draggable scroll bar to zoom through the pages smoothly. I see. So in other words, here, what's that doing there?
Like expand. Maybe it's in the wrong corner.
What kind of expanding is it? But I like the idea of framing the whole thing and not having those things just hang out.
I guess if you'd click expand, it would show this version, sort of.
Well, except if it's a huge data set, you don't want to show the whole thing.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to show the whole thing. But that expander could be a plus expander that just goes, that just is the
So what if it was, okay, so it says the total here, and then if they click the total, and then so right now you don't see this, but after they click the total, then you see these things, and it's a big menu. Plus, maybe there's some more options here.
Well, you're saying the scroll bars are hidden until you click total?
no,
Right, because you're limiting the amount displayed here.
I think that would be weird. Who would know to click total in order to get the scroll bars?
So what's this do right now then? Maybe I'm confused as to what this does.
Well, so that shows you that gives you a window into the entire data set. Says I only want to see
data set. The case of the sub data set is different.
Oh, is that what that is?
Yes.
Okay.
Let's keep going a minute.
That was my confusion then.
Right, we've got some problems to solve here. But I personally, visually, I don't particularly like those things hanging out in free space around the data set.
Right, they could be incorporated into the frame, like scroll bars usually are.
But I like Jose's idea of bringing numbers in only when.
Right, so you would see a little annotation next to the cursor that shows you like where you are and then shows you the total number.
Yeah. But now this collapse all thing, I don't quite understand. What the point there is that in our data sets, we don't have, I don't know how well, do we scroll or do we page through the thing?
Well, you can page with the buttons, the arrow buttons, you can scroll with the bar.
Okay, then I don't understand what the collapsed version is. Maybe it's just a question of how fast it can scroll. If you click the bottom horizontal scroll buttons, it doesn't update the left-hand vertical scroll bar. That's totally dumb. Okay, well, if we're getting rid of the buttons, then we don't have to worry about that. Listen, what we need to do, if the thing is not showing everything here, we really do need to say, we need to indicate that there's more coming, blah, 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 total.
Isn't that what the scroll bars tell you?
I guess. I just like to put like a ... at the bottom or something to make sure people are not confused. Okay, let's keep going. Index header.
So here I'm proposing, you should open up everything there. I'm proposing that we should show the indices of matrices and things as headers.
No, not by default.
Why not?
Because it's just not what you want in a lot of cases. It makes it ugly and makes it look like a spreadsheet. There are plenty of cases where you don't want that. You might want that, and I think that should be an option to do that. And arguably, that should be a right-click thing to say show indices.
Okay. A right-click thing if you mouse down anywhere within the data set? Or?
That's what I'm thinking, yeah. or in the, I strongly don't think we should do this.
All right. Well, you can see my reasons down below for wanting headers.
No, those are just for your convenience. We got to figure out a different way to do it.
Perhaps this links with the idea of having a second argument specifying headers. We could put automatic there, and then it would do something like this.
Perhaps, yes. Perhaps. I mean, we could put it in, as I think there's got to be an option to control having this, because you might want it for rows, but not for columns, whatever else. Okay. But I think, and there should be a nice UI way to switch it on, but it shouldn't be there by default.
We just talked about this.
Okay.
And you've had a look at that already.
I thought it was magnificent. Is this operable?
Yeah.
So is this what we want, sort and reverse sort? I think that's
you need to evaluate that again in order to make those controls operable.
Okay. But for us, sort and reverse sort are the right names rather than sort up, sort down.
Yeah. And what about for not sorting? You need to click the text. Yeah.
Not sorted, reverse sort. What about not sorted? Or you think unsort is a better term because it only comes up if you have got a sorting in.
Yeah. I've also used don't sort.
No, because that's different because that's not an action. Unless you're thinking of sort here as a noun, but everything else is a verb.
Yeah.
I think it wants to be unsort.
Can we have arrows in there that shows? Oh, that's right. I forgot that thing appears.
But wait a minute. This does sort the whole data set, right? It doesn't just sort. Yeah. Okay. That's magnificent.
And if you have, and you can sort multiple things within a data set. I mean, if they're not all at the same level. Like if you go to C now and sort that, then the sorting on B will disappear. But
okay.
if you have separate levels, you can have sorting on different levels.
Right. I mean, in a perfect world, you would have subsorting, right? In other words, you sort on B, and then the ties of B you can resolve some other way.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody does that.
I have no idea how you do that interactively.
Right. So Sandra on the live stream is talking about how people call sort ascending and sort descending. Yeah, I know. But I think sort and reverse sort makes more sense given our function names. I'm not certain about that. We should make a note that we should consider ascending and descending. Yeah, that's a question of when the things are in the tabular format, how do they truncate? Is that correct?
Yeah, whether you show the 63 total or something else.
Well, also, if I've got a giant mega thing for that cell, what does it do? Right, because there's formatting rules.
Oh, right. Sorry,
cells.
I was confused. You're right. That's what we're talking about. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think this is some kind of display function thing because I think that's very similar to, I mean, in other words, it's like short, right? Given a cell size, what do you actually show? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. And then the question is, should the option match on the type of the data or the level within the data set or both somehow?
I think what should happen is, I would think that this is a pretty detailed thing that most people will not adjust, and the best thing to do will be to give it an association that contains a bunch of information. Right? It contains the actual thing you're formatting. Content, path. You might as well give the full path. Well, those are the two things that are most interesting, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Ethan is saying, what about a ribbon style attached cell menu like for images? For doing what? I mean, there isn't a click action here. Like for images, there's a click action and the whole image is selected, and then you can bring up a
So sort of like a data set ribbon.
Yeah, right. I mean, that would be an interesting thing to do, but it's not clear what brings it up. Because with an image, you click the image to select the image, and then it brings up a ribbon.
A little ribbon button.
Yeah. Sounder, by the way, is saying in Excel, the ties are sorted as follows. First sort by C, then by B. Yeah, that's what I thought. If you want to sort by B and then ties. Oh, no, it's the other way around. Okay. And then, okay. But anyway, there's a notion of multiple column sorting there. So I was not wrong that there is that notion. Right? So in other words, that you could sort by multiple columns. Yeah, right. Ethan is suggesting a right click to apply a function to column B, where you write your code in a pop-up window. I agree that is quite interesting. That one of the menu items there should be apply a function to this column.
To determine how the contents are displayed.
Well, potentially, but I think also there's the question of actually doing operations on the data set.
And having that reflected in the dataset data?
Well, I mean, that's code synthesis from this. Oh, hold on, let me just consider also tie breaking, i.e. Okay, so here's a very naive question. We don't have a good mechanism. We would say, if we said sort by, right? We could say sort by certain, hold on, how does sort by work? Doesn't it have a tiebreaker mechanism? Yes, it does. It has exactly that tiebreaker mechanism. See?
Yeah.
For what it's worth, okay? So those could be actually just names of association keys. Okay, preserving compound objects.
This is just a way of specifying what should be treated as atomic and not.
Yes, I understand, but how are you proposing doing it?
I don't have a proposal yet. This is just an agenda item.
Okay, I agree that that's necessary. So I mean that's basically, as the data set is constructed, that's the second argument. The headers argument should also say, don't make this into a, somehow don't do the drill down here to make it into a data set.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we had a meeting about this once, and determined there was a lot of things to discuss here. This is just generally about all these formatting options. And there's a separate notebook with lots of things to discuss in it.
Okay.
I haven't implemented the options at the bottom yet. I think they're probably all necessary, but
Does someone need permissions to store the data into a notebook?
What are we talking about there? Why are you asking that?
The original reason, kind of like why I got invited to this meeting, was for store data set into notebook. The little button that was going to go down here.
No, you don't need permissions. You are using the notebook.
Okay.
I do think frame and frame style and so on are super useful.
Yeah.
I think spacing is less useful. I mean, I don't know. These may not be, if we do a good job with the defaults, it's not so critical.
Mm-hmm. There's another agenda item. We don't have currently any versioning information in dataset cells.
Might as well put them in. Might as well put it in.
Yep.
That's important. Is that working now?
Yeah.
What happens if you have a data set where it hasn't stored all its data in the notebook? What does it do?
It says, it gives you a message, something like the data is not available.
Okay.
It does essentially the same thing that summary boxes do.
Okay, question from Seth on the we're worried about spinning beach balls on large data sets. Yes, we are worried about that, and we have to, try and get our act together so that doesn't happen. Second question is, if you normal a sorted data set, is it sorted?
No, the sorting is only a display thing.
So here's what we need. Just like with manipulate, okay? We need a paste down this thing, right? So just like in a manipulate, you have, you move all the sliders around, and then it can paste a version of the manipulate, right? If I'm making sense. So actually, it pastes a version of the content of the manipulate with those settings set. So I think this needs to be able to paste a data set with those settings set.
So what, for example, would elided columns do? Would they disappear?
Well, that gives an argument for hide versus remove. And remove, there would be no UI. It's just gone. And it wouldn't be useful unless you were to do the resolve this data set. I mean, it would be useful if you were looking at a data set and you've just got a ton of stuff there and you just don't want any of it. You say remove, 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 for the sake of essentially doing an operation that you can then copy down.
Yeah.
I mean, I kind of like that idea. I really like that idea, actually. It's more useful, probably. Removal is probably more useful for rows than for columns.
Uh-huh.
Now, okay, taking a leaf out of the insanities of Excel, okay? I mean, every time I use Excel, I'm confused because of the whole business about, can I type now? Can I type now? What's going to happen, right? So one thing we could do in this theory that what you see could be what you get is have a right-click menu that allows you to edit a cell. See what I'm saying? And it simply brings up an editor there. It's not the way that you want to enter. If you're doing a giant data entry project, it's not the way you want to do it. And Excel, the reason it's awkward is that it has a lot of stuff that's optimized for, data entry, where it's, auto-completing and all this kind of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is, that can be what table view does. But here, I suggest that what we do is we actually do allow, sort of, you can adjust what you see. And, just like you can adjust a slider, and if you were to reevaluate it, okay, so this is a question of, is it a data set in input or a data set in output? Well, most data sets are in output, but you could have a data set in input. And the question is then, what does this do if you adjust these things? And I would argue that the very nice thing for it to do is, if it's in input, then those adjustments, if you press Shift-Enter, they become real. And if you have a data set in output, well, the natural thing that we would do in the front end is, if you make a change, it copies down and becomes a data set in input. But I'm not sure we want to do that by default, because I think a lot of these things are merely like manipulate doesn't copy down, right?
Yeah.
So I think the correct behavior is it doesn't copy down by default, but there is a menu item that does get it to copy down. But we provide a variety of sort of editing functionality that allows you to go in and change things, but those don't become permanent unless you copy it down. And conceivably,
Or presumably if you just evaluate it. It would be the same effect as copying.
Your cursor there.
Yes, yeah. And
yeah, I think that's correct, yes. Yes, so Ethan is commenting, and I agree that there are a whole bunch of these things we need, that when you right-click on a cell, you should be able to get the query. You should certainly be able to get the path for that cell. And I think we already have that functionality. Paste the path.
Yes.
Okay.
So this is an old agenda item. And I don't know how much of it has been done or what remains to be done. Some of these items already have special formats.
I think interval could do with having a special format. Other than that, I think I'm fine with these.
Okay. So who would determine what the interval formatting would look like?
We have special formatting in quantity for interval, so we could imitate that.
Okay.
Is there special formatting for geoposition?
Inside dataset, I think there is, yes.
Okay, so that's not in the list here. So you better look at the code, Chris, and find out what else there is. But this looks like it isn't broken.
Okay.
What does that mean? What does locking mean?
This was your suggestion that you should be able to determine, like click on a header and say, don't let this column scroll, only for the leftmost ones.
Don't let this column scroll. What does that mean?
It means if you scroll, all the other columns would scroll, but that one would stay put. So the keys currently behave that way. They don't scroll away, but you were asking to be able to designate columns as well that wouldn't scroll.
Oh, gosh. That seems surplus to requirements. That seems very ornate.
Yeah, I don't really see the use of it, but
spreadsheets don't have that typically, as far as I know. You realize I've never learned to use a spreadsheet in a sophisticated way in all these years. I've never needed to.
Jose mentioned this earlier. If you do equal on data sets, they're not equal because of this ID information.
What is that ID information?
It's essentially a pointer to a cache. It shouldn't be there.
It shouldn't be there. Yeah, it's just wrong.
You asked for this, a way to make it work like image, where you can change the options. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Well, that's what's been commented on multiple times. Oh, that's a cool idea from Ethan. If you highlight multiple cells, give you the optimal pattern. I would say that's a great summer school project. Give you the optimal pattern and selection conditions that will get you those cells. What a good summer school project.
Yeah. First, we need a way of highlighting cells. Can't currently do that.
Right. Sushma, can you remind me to add that to the list for the?
Yep.
Oh boy, do we care? That seems to me like a very ornate thing. I mean, Grid has never had that.
I could see where it might be useful. I mean, sometimes
Does Excel have that?
I don't know. I mean, there's only rows and columns in Excel, but
I think this is surplus to requirements here for now.
Right.
I think it's cool, but I think we shouldn't worry about it right now.
These are examples where changing some things result in surprising reorganizations of the data set.
Why does it do it in this case?
I have no idea. I
Might
have
be a bug.
to ask Tally.
Okay,
Well, I mean, I don't think it's it may be, you may consider it a bug, but it's intentional.
I think this is depending on the type that is computed for the data. And because the type is history dependent, sometimes the same data, depending on how you arrived at it, formats differently.
Okay,
No, there's a difference here. In one case, the keys and the association are integers. In the other case, they're strings. That's what causes the difference.
Yes, but what I'm saying is that even for the same data...
Okay, so I'll tell you why this is happening, okay? The reason this is happening is because it is the assumption that if they're strings, that they have a chance to be longer.
Yeah.
Although that's violated by the fact that this is actually the numeric keys one. So I don't understand that. That seems... Well, this seems kind of wacky to me. Probably ask Tally.
In this case, you get different layouts depending on how many elements you're displaying, which seems kind of weird.
Well, I think there are going to be breakpoints of that type somewhere. I don't know. I'm not totally horrified. I mean, to me, this is in the category of it isn't totally broken right now.
Yeah.
Pivot tables. How would we do that?
I have no idea. It sounds like a bigger project to me. It's just an agenda item that you threw out.
Okay, but I mean, so that's more of an operation on the whole data set. That is an important thing, but we should think about it separately.
Yeah, okay.
Nested data sets.
This is another, it was in your notes.
Do we support nested data sets right now?
Yeah, you can make nested data sets like at that example.
Okay, what's wrong with these? Well, it probably informs how we do the scrolling. So a data set nested inside a data set, the inner data set doesn't get scroll bars, right?
Right.
Instead, it goes to, notice, Billy, it goes to this form. The inner data set goes to the, total whatever form, okay? Now, one of the issues with this is, let's say the inner data set was really big. You don't just want, 1,000 total, 10,000 total. You press it and kaboom. See what I'm saying? So, well, I suppose what you would do in that case is you click to get that data set. Let's see whether that actually works.
Yeah, you have to reevaluate.
That's not super encouraging. I can't seem to
It's-
click.
Oh, it's not. Okay, those are not functional in the. Okay. I hadn't actually tried that.
Yeah, so I mean, that would be the obvious thing to do. You click to get that. You've got drill down, and then it gives you a scrollable thing. But I think, I think there's a limit. If this says 10,000 total, it probably shouldn't open, first time. Honestly, what that should do is another one of these hover menus, if that's big. If it's small, if it's like 10 or something, you can just do it. But if it's really big, I think it needs to give you a hover menu saying, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to have to go soon here, but
So we haven't nailed down the syntax for specifying, for example, formats of internal items, but when we do operations like take, we'll have to monkey with those paths in order to preserve the appearances of things. So you can open up all those cells to see example.
what's your point?
Well, so if you take all but the first row and column of that data set, what you want to get is what's in the last output there. But that means changing the syntax of those of that option, because the paths are different now for the background.
So you're assuming that you want to lock the formatting to elements rather than lock it to,
Yes.
line printer
Yeah.
paper, so to speak.
Right.
Yeah, by the way, Ethan on live stream is pointing out the exporting of dataset to SQL dumps, which I don't believe we have. Export to an access database thing. That's another thing. Sushma, that will be a thing for the database team, I think.
Okay.
I think. I'm not sure. I don't know how the access, maybe it's a thing for Shoddy and the export stuff. Okay, I don't really understand this one. And this one, to me,
But you understand the behavior that.
I understand the behavior. I'm not sure what behavior one wants. I mean, I kind of think that by the time you're doing a raw take on the data set,
Currently, the formatting just disappears.
well, then that's fine for now. I mean, I think that's a version 2.
Okay.
I mean, I think what we want to do is an item style type mechanism for individual items. And if your item didn't get zapped, you keep the formatting. And if it didn't, I don't know. I think this is complicated because this is very similar. Let me give you an analogy. This is very similar, and you should talk to Charles about this. It's very similar to what happens with graphs, where you've decorated a graph and then you do operations on the graph. And Charles introduced on version 12 a kind of calculus of carrying along attributes. Okay.
Yeah.
Like if you union two graphs, do you carry along the colors of the nodes and so on?
Yeah.
Talk to Charles about this.
Okay.
Yeah, well, eventually what we want to be able to do, and I think this is a useful thing, is when you give the header information, when you construct the data set, or you give options to it, to be able to say, actually, I don't want Mercury, Venus, Earth to be laid out at all like this. I just want them to be tabs at the top.
Right.
We could call them tabby data sets, like tabby cats. When importing data sets, I'm not sure what that means. Importing from where?
This is an item from you. If you have like a CSV file that has a blank line on it, that you would preserve that in the data set. It certainly seems like
Yes.
a version 2 feature to me.
Yeah, it's a version 2 feature. For sure, it's a version 2 feature. Pagination.
So there was a pagination option on your original agenda. I don't think it's relevant anymore.
I don't think it's relevant either.
Yeah. And this is the idea that you show the structure of that data set with the style of the frame lines. You can open that second output.
That's magnificent. That's magnificent.
So that's a styled data set?
What are you saying?
Is that a styled data set?
No, the point is that you're showing how that table is structured. I mean, this is what table form I mean, if table form wasn't a version 1 function, it would do things like this. And arguably should be updated to do this. Chris, you understand what I mean? Table form just actual raw spaces between. If you do a 3-dimensional table, it'll use actual raw spaces there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, access spans. Ethan says access spans on both X and Y zoom into a submatrix. Yeah, the whole submatrix thing, we need to write down to talk about submatrices, but it's version 2. Yeah, semantic import, big complicated thing. We'll work on it. We have some big ideas for that. All right, so we failed to resolve the stuff at the beginning about how to represent elision. How to represent this items displayed thing. I think we need another meeting about that. If you can have a think about it, that would be good. But I think we're talking about that and the elision stuff. Yeah. That's really what we need to do.
And the entire formatting. I mean, there are lots of issues around the formatting options, which involve some of the same issues.
Okay, of representing pods and how we specify things and so on.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's get another meeting set up. Yeah. Anything else here? Good. That should be that. Sushma, are you around later? Could I give you a call a bit later? Perhaps?
Okay. What? Okay.
Okay. Thanks to everybody, and thanks to folks on the live stream. Very useful comments, much appreciated. And I look forward to. Don't leave it too long for another meeting in this series, please. Otherwise, you'll have to tell me everything again. I think my memory decay time for this will be on the order of a week. Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
Right. Sounds good. See you all. It's very nice stuff, Chris.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay. Bye.